The first time the house felt different. No one said it out loud. It was early morning, the kind where the light slips in slowly through the curtains and sits quietly on the floor before climbing the walls. I was 10 years old, sitting cross-legged near the hallway vent, because that was where the heat came through strongest in winter. My father had left for work an hour earlier. My mother was in the kitchen, moving dishes around with more force than necessary. There was no argument, no raised voices, just a silence that didn't belong to our house. Our house used to breathe. That's the only way I can describe it now. It had rhythm. My father's boots by the door, the smell of sawdust clinging to his jacket, the sound of the radio in the garage playing songs from before I was born. Even the walls seemed to hold onto that life, like they understood they were part of something being built, not just repaired. My father believed in building things right the first time. Shortcuts cost more later, he used to say, tightening screws with slow, deliberate turns, like each one mattered more than the last. The house reflected that. Every corner had intention. Every repair had patience behind it. Even the uneven step on the back porch wasn't a mistake. It was a compromise because the tree roots underneath couldn't be moved without killing the oak beside it. "This tree stays," he told me once, resting his hand against its bark. Some things matter more than symmetry. I believed him. I believed everything he said. That was before the hospital, before the machines, before the quiet that followed us home and stayed. After my father died, the house stopped breathing. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in small ways, the way grief usually does. The radio in the garage never turned on again. The boots by the door disappeared. My mother stopped cooking real meals and started heating things from boxes. And the walls stopped holding warmth. They became just walls. I tried to keep things the same. I sat in the same spots. I followed the same routines. I even wound my father's old pocket watch every morning like I'd seen him do, even though I didn't fully understand why it mattered. But routines don't hold a house together. People do, and one person was gone. Roy arrived 11 months later. Not with an announcement, not with a conversation. He just showed up, a white truck in the driveway. Engine idling longer than necessary, the door opening without knocking. I remember the exact moment I saw him. He stood in the doorway like he already belonged there, holding a toolbox in one hand and a paper bag in the other. "Morning," he said, like it was normal, like he had always been there. My mother smiled at him. That was the part that confused me the most. Not because she smiled, but because it looked real. It had been months since I'd seen that kind of smile. The kind that reached her eyes, the kind that didn't feel like something she was forcing just to get through the day. And suddenly, there it was, for him. I told myself that was a good thing. I told myself that meant things were getting better. I was wrong. Roy didn't take over the house, he replaced it. That's the difference most people don't understand. Taking over is loud, obvious, it comes with conflict. Replacing is quiet. It happens slowly, and by the time you notice, everything is already different. The first change was the fence. It had been blue. A soft, faded blue my father had picked because he said it made the yard feel bigger. Roy didn't ask about the color. He didn't mention it. He just painted over it. White. I watched from the porch as he rolled the paint across each board, covering years of history with smooth, even strokes. My mother stood beside him, holding the tray, handing him more paint when he needed it. Neither of them looked at me. I didn't say anything, not because I agreed, but because something in me understood that saying something wouldn't change anything. That was the beginning. The next change was the hallway. Photos started disappearing. At first I thought I had misplaced them. One frame gone, then another. Then the big one, the one of my parents standing in front of the house the day they bought it, vanished overnight. I found it weeks later in a box in the garage, wrapped in newspaper like something fragile that needed to be hidden. I didn't put it back. I didn't ask why. I just learned something important without anyone explaining it to me. Some things were no longer allowed to exist in plain sight. Roy never yelled. That's what made it harder to explain. People expect anger to look like shouting, like doors slamming, like something you can point to and say, "That's wrong." Roy didn't give you that. He spoke calmly. He made decisions quietly, and he always framed them like they were reasonable, practical, necessary. "Phones attract problems," he said when he changed our number. Too many distractions, when I wasn't allowed to visit friends anymore. Focus on what matters, when the back room, my room, was turned into storage. Each explanation made sense on its own. That was the trick. Individually, nothing felt extreme. Together, everything changed. By the time I was 14, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Not in any way that mattered. I had a smaller room, fewer things, fewer people. My grandmother stopped visiting. At least that's what I was told. "She's busy," my mother said. Then later, "She has her own life. And eventually, she doesn't call anymore." I believed that too. Because belief is easier than questioning something you're not allowed to verify. But I kept one thing, just one. My father's pocket watch. It stayed hidden in the bottom drawer of my dresser, wrapped in cloth, safe from being reorganized or put away. I wound it every morning, every single morning, not because I fully understood it, but because it felt like something that still belonged to me, something Roy hadn't touched, something that hadn't been replaced. Years passed like that, quietly. Predictably, controlled. I learned how to exist without being noticed, how to agree without meaning it, how to keep thoughts to myself. I became good at it, too good, because one day I realized something that changed everything. I didn't know who I was in that house anymore, only who I was allowed to be, and that realization didn't come during an argument or a big moment. It came on an ordinary afternoon, standing in the kitchen, watching Roy open the mail before anyone else, reading things that weren't his, deciding what mattered, what didn't, what we were allowed to know, and what we weren't. That's when I understood. The house hadn't just changed, it had been rewritten. Piece by piece, decision by decision, until the version we were living in had nothing left of the one my father built. I didn't fight it, not yet, because at that age, survival looks like compliance, not rebellion, but something had shifted. Something quiet, something steady, like the ticking of a watch you almost forget is there, until you listen closely, and realize it never stopped. The first thing I noticed after they left was the silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from absence, but the kind that comes from something ending. For 16 years, the house had carried Roy in it, not just his voice, not just his footsteps, but his presence. The way a room feels different when someone controlling it is inside, even if they're not speaking. That presence was gone, and in its place there was space. I unlocked the front door myself. The key turned easily, like it had been waiting. When I stepped inside, the air felt different. Lighter, not cleaner. Cleanliness is physical, but something else. The house felt like it was breathing again. I stood in the hallway for a long moment. Nothing had changed. The same walls, the same floors. The same light coming through the window at the end of the corridor. But everything had changed. The back bedroom was the first place I went. My room, or what used to be my room. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and inside, the boxes were still stacked the way Roy had left them. Tools, paint cans, things he never used but kept anyway. The portable table sat in the corner, untouched, exactly where it had been for years. I walked to the window. It was still closed. I unlocked it and pushed it open. The air came in slowly at first, then all at once. Fresh, carrying the smell of wet earth and leaves from the storm. For a second, I just stood there, letting it hit my face. This was how the room used to feel. Morning light, open-air space. I turned back and started moving boxes. One at a time, no rush, no anger, just motion. By evening, the floor was visible again. By night, the room was empty. I didn't sleep in the master bedroom. I didn't want to. That room belonged to a version of the house I was no longer part of. Instead, I brought a mattress into the back bedroom and laid it on the floor. No bed frame. No decorations, just a blanket, a pillow, and the open window. It was enough. That night, I lay on my back staring at the ceiling my father had sanded by hand, and for the first time in years, I slept without listening for footsteps. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The sunlight came in low, exactly the way I remembered. It turned the walls gold, soft and warm, like the room was holding light instead of reflecting it. I sat up slowly, no tension in my chest. No anticipation of what mood the day would bring, just quiet. I reached into the drawer beside the mattress and took out the pocket watch. Tick, 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 still steady. I wound it carefully. Some habits aren't about necessity. They're about continuity. The repairs started that week, not because the house was damaged badly, but because I needed to understand it again. I walked through every room with a notebook, not emotionally, not nostalgically, practically. The roof had lost a few shingles. The fence needed repainting. The gutters were clogged with debris. The back steps had softened at the edges, things my father would have noticed immediately, things Roy had ignored unless they affected him directly. I made a list, then I started. I learned something in those weeks. Fixing something is not the same as controlling it. My father fixed things because he respected them. Roy fixed things because he wanted ownership. The difference is quiet, but it shows up everywhere. In the way you hold a tool, in the way you look at the result, in whether you leave space for something to exist without you. Meredith came by almost every day. Not to help, she didn't interfere unless I asked. But she sat on the porch or leaned against the fence or brought lemonade and watched. "You're doing it the same way he did," she said once. "Slow," I asked. "Careful," she said, "there's a difference." One afternoon, while clearing out the last of Roy's things from the garage, I found something I hadn't expected. A folder, not hidden, just pushed behind a toolbox. Inside were receipts. Not the kind my grandmother used to talk about, the honest kind. These were different. Hardware purchases that didn't match the work done. Supplies bought in bulk and never used. Repairs billed to accounts that didn't belong to him. And one receipt that stood out, a withdrawal from the insurance fund, dated the same week he repainted the fence white. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about intention. He hadn't just taken. He had erased one thing to put himself in its place. That night, I sat on the porch with the receipt in my hand. The fence was already half blue again. The line between white and blue ran straight down the middle like a decision being made. I could leave it half Roy, half my father, but that wasn't truth. That was compromise. And some things are not meant to be shared. So the next morning I finished it, board by board, stroke by stroke, until the white was gone, not covered, gone. A week later, the first repayment came through. Calloway called me. On time, he said. Good, I replied. Consistent matters more than fast, he added. I know, I said. I didn't hear from Roy again, not directly. But once, while driving back from the hardware store, I saw him. At a stoplight, 2 lanes over. He looked older, not dramatically, just less certain. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and chose not to look. The light turned green. We drove in different directions. That night I sat on the porch again, the watch on the table, the fence fully blue, the house quiet. For a long time I thought closure would feel like something large, a moment, a statement, an ending, but it didn't. It felt like this, a steady rhythm, a repaired room, a window open to the air, and the understanding that nothing had been given back to me. Not really, I had just taken it, properly. It happened on a Sunday, not suddenly, not dramatically. Just quietly, like most things that matter. I was on the porch, sanding down the last section of the railing. The wood was rough under my hand, splintered in places where the storm had pushed rain sideways for hours. I worked slowly, the way my father used to, steady pressure, even strokes, no rushing the process. The street was calm, the kind of calm that comes after everything has already happened. I heard footsteps before I saw her, soft, careful. Like someone approaching a place they weren't sure they still belonged to. I didn't turn right away. I already knew who it was. Francis. My mother's voice. It hadn't changed. Still gentle, still controlled. Still carrying that same careful tone she used when she wanted something to go smoothly. I set the sandpaper down. Then I turned. She was standing at the edge of the yard, not on the porch, not at the door, at the edge. Like there was an invisible line she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross. She looked smaller, not physically, but in the way people do when the structure they've leaned on disappears. She held a small bag in her hand. I brought something, she said. I didn't move. What is it? She stepped forward slowly, then stopped halfway up the path. Your father's things. That got my attention. I walked down the steps. She handed me the bag like it weighed more than it should. Inside were small things. Not valuable, not important to anyone else. A measuring tape, a set of worn-out screwdrivers, a folded receipt from a hardware store dated years ago, and a photograph, the one that used to hang in the hallway. My parents standing in front of the house the day they bought it. I looked at it for a long time. I found it, she said quietly, in one of Roy's boxes. I think he forgot it was there. Forgot, the word sat wrong, but I didn't argue. Why are you here? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the house. The fence, the open window of the back bedroom, the porch railing half sanded. I didn't realize how much had changed, she said. It didn't change, I replied. It came back. She nodded slowly, like she understood or like she wanted to. We stood there in silence, not uncomfortable, just unfinished. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said finally. I know. I thought stability mattered more than anything else. It does, I said, but not the kind that costs everything else. Her eyes shifted toward me. I was afraid, she admitted. That doesn't excuse it. No, she said, it doesn't. That was the moment, not forgiveness, not resolution, just honesty. And sometimes that's where things actually begin. Can I come in? She asked. I looked at the house, then back at her. You can sit on the porch. It wasn't rejection. But it wasn't an invitation either. It was the truth of where we were. She nodded and sat. We didn't talk much after that. She watched while I worked, the same way Meredith used to, but it felt different, heavier. Like every quiet second was holding years inside it. After a while she spoke again. Roy isn't doing well, she said. I didn't respond. He doesn't say much anymore. He goes to work, comes back, sleeps. I kept sanding. I think he believed it was his, she added. That doesn't make it his. No, she said again. When I finished the railing, I brushed the dust off my hands and sat down across from her. For the first time since she arrived, we were facing each other directly. No movement, no distraction, just space. I'm not coming back, she said. I know. I don't expect to. I know. She took a breath. I don't know how to fix this. I looked at her. You don't. That wasn't harsh. It was just accurate. But I wanted you to have those, she said, nodding toward the bag. And I wanted to see if you were okay. I thought about that. About everything. The storm, the house, the years, the silence. I am, I said. And for the first time it was completely true. She stayed for another 10 minutes. Then she stood up. No hug, no dramatic goodbye, just a pause. "Your father would be proud," she said again. This time it sounded different, less like something she felt obligated to say, more like something she finally understood. She walked down the path, past the fence, onto the street. And then she was gone. That night I hung the photograph back in the hallway, not in the exact same spot, but close enough. The house didn't need to be restored perfectly, it just needed to be honest. Weeks passed, then months. Life didn't transform overnight, it settled, slowly, steadily. The repayments continued, on time, every time. Calloway stopped calling unless something changed. Nothing did. Meredith still came by, less often, but regularly. Sometimes with lemonade, sometimes just to sit. My grandmother still visited every Sunday, always with almond cake, always with stories. But now sometimes we didn't talk about the past, we talked about what was next. And me, I stayed. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. One evening, late in the year, I was in the back bedroom. My room, the window open, the air cool. I had finally put a proper bed in, a desk, a lamp, nothing excessive, just enough. I opened the drawer and took out the pocket watch, held it in my hand, listened. Tick, tick, tick. Time had passed. A lot of it, some of it lost, some of it taken, some of it reclaimed, but the watch didn't care about any of that. It just kept moving, steady, uninterrupted. I set it on the desk, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to hold on to it, not because it mattered less, but because I finally understood what it represented. Not the past, not loss, not even my father, but continuity, the fact that things can keep going, even after everything stops. I turned off the light, left the window open, and walked out into the hallway. The photograph was there. The house was quiet, the fence outside was still blue, and everything that was supposed to stay had stayed.